Once there was a people who lived in the grassy valley of an ancient country. One side was bound by a river. One side was forested with thick trees. The people lived a simple life, hard but rewarding, farming through the years, and every spring they went into the forest to hold a special service of thanksgiving for the spring, singing and praying a special blessing and gathering baskets of flowers. The songs were carefully handed down over the generations. The prayers were kept in a sacred scroll. The baskets were of finest weave, a special pattern for only this particular celebration. It was very special and reminded the people of all they had endured over the long winter and over the generations of their community's existence. One year, there was a sickness, and the oldest basket weaver passed away, taking with her the knowledge of how to weave the special pattern. There was sadness and concern in the community, but they comforted themselves, saying the weaver had been more important to them than the weaving. So they went into the forest that spring without the baskets to pray and sing and bless. Another year there was a drought, and many of the young people left for the city to make money. While they were gone, they forgot the song. But the people back home consoled themselves, saying that the young people were more important than the song. And they went into the forest to pray and bless. One terrible year, there was unrest and rumors of a war, and bandits raided the village and stole the sacred scroll. The people consoled themselves, and when spring came, they went into the forest anyway. It was more important than the scroll itself. But a war did come, and that war was not a short one or merciful in any way. So at last the day came when the small group of remaining community members gathered their belongings and made the first steps on the long trip to America. They did not have the scroll. No one remembered the song. The last of the baskets was left in a hurry to pack, never to be replaced. They even, of course, left behind their beloved forest. On the deck of the ship to the new country they gathered. They knew in the new country they would be divided from one another into new neighborhoods, new ways of life. Some would try to farm, some would try the cities. Who would they be in this new world full of new ways? And someone said, remember the spring? How we would take the baskets into the forest, say special prayers with the most beautiful words, sing songs that shook the winter off. They did not have the baskets, the song, the prayer, or even the forest. But speaking of it, was a consolation. Speaking of it was a blessing. All they had was the story of a blessing long ago. All they had was the story. But it was enough. He is risen. That is the story of Easter. But the words, he is risen, are a door behind which lies a vast place of inquiry. He is risen, but how? He is risen, but why? He is risen, for whom? He is risen, but where? He is risen is not the end of the Easter mystery. He is risen is a provocative bump in the humanistic road of reason. He is risen, but what did they see? He is risen, but what did they not see? He is risen, but what does that mystical statement mean? He is risen, but did it really happen? All we have is the story. Famous and hilarious story from the files of First Church. Famously and hilariously, the beloved minister emerita of sainted memory, Dr. Kilsby of this church, the minister who brought this congregation back from the brink of unsustainability, who raised the call to justice for the gay and lesbian community, as it was then called, as that community was ravaged by the last big plague. Famously, she was invited to an illustrious preaching gig at a famous outdoor chapel at a well-known cemetery to the stars, because we have those in LA County, to preach an Easter sunrise service. And in that Easter sunrise service, she preached against the bodily resurrection of Christ. And famously, she was a hit. And famously, she was never asked back again. It even made the papers. Preacher debates bodily resurrection on Easter morning. How fortunate are we, friends, to be part of a Christian tradition that does not ask us to believe the unbelievable, but to dare to trust the trustworthy. He is risen, and we do not have the baskets. He is risen, and most of what people saw was not a presence, but an absence. He is risen, and it makes no sense. He is risen, and all we have is the story. Could it be enough? Because on Easter, we know spring again. We know hope again. The Lenten journey for many of you started in March 2020 and has simply persisted until now, when vaccines and new leadership and even the weather is better than during the terrible months of last year when our state was in flames. The sky turned the color of death. So much has been cracked open. The old fabric of white supremacy torn open, rent open. The stone rolled away to reveal ancient truths, showing us that Black Lives Matter is not a partisan statement, but a confession for a nation founded and upheld on 400 years of the wrongly held assumption that any person is the master of another. Any person deserves more air to breathe, more of the room, more of the world. We have spring again because the painful truths have been told and heard again and again. And we have spring because disbelief and fear have melted into new and refreshed commitments of understanding. We have spring because he is risen, and it's not one story or one meaning. It's the choice of a God to invest in us. One of our UCC friends from Southern California, now teaching in Scotland, Trip Fuller, talks about this in his book, Divine Self-Investment and Open and Relational Constructive Christology. He poses hard questions about relevance. In a time when God and church are irrelevant to so many, how do we talk about Jesus, let alone Easter? How do you say he is risen when the idea that God would be specially revealed in Jesus is hinged on a host of other questions that don't feel relevant either? As a process theologian, he posits that the story is still being written, that God is alive in today, not just a historical moment, long ago at Calvary, invested and investing in creating history with us as time rolls out ahead of us. What if the historical Jesus is not a closed moment in history books, but a sign of an ongoing engagement of the divine with the world as we knew it, know it now, and are open to it becoming? What if the brief and flickering life of the radical desert sage of first century Palestine, about whom so little can be proven, what if that life is a moment of openness? What if we didn't think of Jesus as a person who did this and said that, but as a holy opening in the stultifying routine of human agreements, so few of which lift us up? What if Easter is not the moment, but Jesus is the moment? What if Easter is not the moment long ago, but Jesus is the moment still happening? A moment which makes an opening through which we can see the kinship of the goddess abundantly around us all the time. What if the Jesus of Easter was not merely a person from then and there, but also a moment of grace that allows us to see all things new again? As one of our very wise confirmation students said last summer, what if Jesus is a blueprint? What if Jesus is a way, a moment, when people see into the vast potential of a life less ordinary, more peaceful, less subject to the crushing economy of our human ideas of value and mastery and work and money, and more open to an economy of salvation, where all of us are shining moments of openness as well. For we do not have the baskets. We do not have a song from that first Easter. We do not have a prayer. We do not have a forest. All we have is the story. It's an old and dusty tale, easily sentimentalized into a playful celebration of spring, which is nice. Easily ignored for all of its ancient worldview and dubious scientific chops. All we have is the story of the women disciples frightened by an empty tomb with burial wrappings scattered on the ground. All we have is the disbelief of the male disciples, the anguish of Mary crying out, "Where is he?" All we have are the stories of mysterious visits chronicled by the traumatized disciples, the unexplainable meals of truth and substance, the bonfire on the beach, the familiar voice and the familiar truth, laced through mythology into today. All we have is the story. The story that says Jesus was a person, but is also somehow a moment when we, ordinary people, see and feel the vast, sparkling aliveness of a universe of love. And all that we still encounter today, we still encounter the tidal pull of God's love and investment in us. In that wide open moment of Jesus, the door opens. And it's not another upper room. The stone rolls away. And it's not a barren place. It's all the love in heaven and nature singing. And it is for you. All we have is the story. All we have is the blessing. And friends, on this Easter Sunday, that is enough. May it be so. Amen.